Welcome to the final hour of the show, Morning Glory. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here at 10. Tim Montgomerie's here. Tim, very good morning to you.
Good morning. I've got to take issue with you immediately, though.
Go on, then.
You know, not everyone likes this heat.
No, I know they don't.
I don't. And I actually, so annoys me sometimes when people always say, oh, brilliant, it's going to be 27 degrees today.
Yes.
I hate it.
Do you?
I love brightness.
Yes.
But I can't sleep at night when it's hot,
I mean,
particularly in London.
It's true. It's true.
I actually did. I'm sorry, I'm going to pest you on this
No,
point
go on.
because I actually commissioned an opinion poll on this.
Did you?
And I asked the British people what they liked.
Okay.
And actually, we're very split. It's sort of, I think half the people are with me. They like they like brightness, they like warmth, but they don't. If it sort of gets much above 22, 23, they're not happy.
I must admit, last year when it was up in the 30s, that was definitely not for me in London.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's going to be over 30 degrees, I want to be somewhere by a swimming pool.
Yeah.
I don't want to be,
and with
clambering
aircon.
upstairs and with air conditioning. I lived in New York for 10 years, and the summer was unbelievably sort of humid and ghastly and horrible for about a good month and a half. But everything was air conditioned.
Yeah.
But here, nothing is.
No.
You've got to find restaurants that are cool and bars that are cool and places you can hang out that are cool.
Sure. You're just talking about the Green Party leader and her gas boiler. I want to know whether Greta Thunberg has air conditioning.
I'm sure she does. I'm sure she does. I mean, this is the trouble with most of these people. We just had a caller actually on recently. He said in the part of Britain that he lives in, all of the places where you got a green sign up on the outside, we're voting green. Yeah. Massive house, great big oil burning Arga, gravel driveway, a couple of Range Rovers on the front. These are all people who can afford to go green. But we can't. Let's talk about the latest polling though, because we're looking at sort of still a large number of people who are not sure how they're going to vote, if they're going to vote at all.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's usually true in most elections. I think perhaps one of the differences this time is most people, I think, have decided they don't like the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And there is some enthusiasm for reform. But the overall thing I picked up, certainly on the doorsteps, I've been going around largely helping Conservative candidates, you won't be surprised to hear.
Yes.
But there's no
thankless task.
It is a thankless task. There's no enthusiasm generally out there.
No.
There is. I remember in '97 when the Tories last lost, there was enthusiasm for Blair.
There was.
And this time, I think people are beginning to think, can anyone govern this country?
Yeah.
Can any of the problems I really care about be fixed by anyone?
Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that are wrong with this country, and people complain about the NHS, they complain about the trains, they complain about the roads, they complain about all manner of things that don't work properly. You can't really just blame the government for that.
No.
The things that are being run badly by the people that run them.
Of course. And look, we're quite parochial.
Yeah.
And I'm not defending a lot of what the Conservatives have done. I've often been on your programme, Mike, and haven't. But look what's about to happen in France. The National Rally, the party of Marine Le Pen, are about to score a stonking victory.
Yes.
The AfD, the right-wing party in Germany, they came second recently in the European elections. Just mention America, I don't need to say anything else. There is a problem in Western democracy. There are many manifestations and causes of it, but I think sometimes we're so sort of focused on British politics for understandable reasons, we miss the fact there's something gone wrong. I think it's partly because of our ageing population, partly because the amount we borrow as states. Part of the states are too big, trying to do too much. The kind of politician now that, all focused on media handling and communication. There's lots of reasons, but we need some massive change in our country.
I can't remember a time when
right.
government was this big, where they're into absolutely everything, even to the point where they're advising you, where to stand, which way to walk, how to do almost everything. Yeah. And some people want them to be in that role, but I certainly don't. And certainly, traditional Conservatives do not expect government to tell them how to live, or to tell them how to eat, or to tell them how to stay healthy. Yeah. But we get this all the time.
Yeah. And
I walked past a park the other day. I was just out wandering around in sort of southeast London. There's a sign on the outside of the fence saying, during the winter months, these pathways may be slippery. So if you go in, just beware that you don't fall. You don't need a sign for that, do you?
No, of course you don't. But the paradox of this election is, I think people are fed up. Lots of Conservatives are fed up with a government that is sort of too bossy, too involved in their lives, taxing too much. But of course, the paradox is they're about to elect someone who does all of those things on steroids.
Yeah.
I think we've got 10 days, 10, 11 days?
10 days.
10 days until the election. When polling booths close on the 4th of July, we won't be able to do anything again for 5 years. Right. Winters will roll by, summers will roll by. Labour will be able to do anything it wants on immigration, on tax, on trans rights, all the stuff I think both you and I care about, Mike. So I understand why over the next 10 days people are looking forward to punishing the Conservatives. But ultimately, if they punish the Conservatives too much, the people who will be most punished will be the British people.
But of course, if Labour sells it the right way, people will go, actually, no, we want them to come in because they will fix this, and this, and they will make it a more fair society. I mean, I think, unfortunately, there are people who think that this is an unfair society. I don't happen to agree with that. I think it's about as fair a society as you can get, because I know America very well. I know other countries in Europe pretty well. You know, nothing in the world is particularly fair, and the government doesn't make it any fairer. But if say for example the private schools manifesto pledge is anything to judge by, Labour Party is all about punishing people for doing well, and they don't wish to encourage it.
And I think people have an idea about private education as well. There are some very elite private schools which cost a fortune, and they help already successful children to become more successful. But there's a private school I'm familiar with in Salisbury, without going into too much detail. Now, some of the parents, well, their children has real speaking, problems, and they are scrimping and saving in order to get into a school.
We absolutely know
one
this.
has one leg missing, and their parents are put him there because he was being bullied in the other school. And he's getting now. Those are parents going the extra mile for the most wonderful thing in all of society, which is the love of a parent for their kids. And I don't think you should penalise that.
No.
And of course, what will happen is that those parents may not be able to afford to send their kids to those private schools anymore, and they'll go into the state school, already a burdened state school, and make it harder for teachers already struggling.
And already, though, they've sort of taken a step back from it, because it looks as though it won't now come in, even if they put it into the first sort of, budget, until 2025. So, I mean, if you are thinking about sending your child to a private school, or you do, there'll be at least another year. And I wonder whether they might move away from that, because they'll see that it's actually, it's an ideological move, isn't it? It's nothing more. But let's talk about the state of the Tories, because we understand there was a story at the weekend that people who have got a small majority of, say, 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 are being told not to bother campaigning their own constituency. Go and help, your neighbour who might have a 20,000 majority to protect, who's also in trouble.
Well,
how did they get this bad?
How long have we got to answer that question?
About 10 minutes.
Look, well, the stories are right. I've heard it directly from 3 Conservative candidates in the southwest of England who've been told to go, not just to neighbouring seats, with slightly bigger majorities, but as you say, with majorities you would have thought would be absolutely rock solid. I don't entirely know what to make of it, though. I know it's clearly bad, but what
it's basically throwing in the towel, isn't it?
Well, they're trying to defend a rump of seats so that there's some kind of opposition to the incoming Labour government after the election. But Tory HQ, I'm going to tell you something that will shock you to your core now, Mike, is not very competent.
No. Along with the rest of the Tory government.
Exactly. So what I don't know is actually whether they really know. I suspect there's blind panic in Tory HQ, and just because they are defending 20,000 majority seats, it may be actually that quite a lot of seats less vulnerable than that will actually survive. But they are in such a state of panic at the moment. They've lost the director of the campaigns, as we know. They've lost their data officer. I'm not sure they will entirely know which seats they should be putting resources into, but they're certainly in a panic. No,
it is incredible, isn't it, that they could have got to this point. I was asked at the weekend by someone just who was an interested party, do you think Rishi Sunak's going to lose his own seat? I think he is. At this rate, he could be. It's not easy to guarantee that he won't.
No, well, if I was him, I'd probably want to, because do you want to stick around as being you'd be surrounded in Parliament with the consequences of your leadership. A Labour supermajority, potentially the biggest majority we've seen in the post-war period.
And would you expect Rishi Sunak, if it was to come to pass that on July the 4th it goes the way everybody thinks it's going to go, does he resign straight away? What does he do?
I hope so. What I do hope, though, and we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but I hope the Conservative Party doesn't rush into a leadership election. There's a model that the Canadian Conservatives do, whereby they wait a year to choose a leader. And what they do is they have a proper examination of what went wrong. They don't rush, they get it right. And I hope we'll have an interim leader, someone like perhaps James Cleverly or Mel Stride, who can hold the party together during that period. and then we properly examine what went wrong, because the country deserves the Conservative Party to fundamentally be reconfigured, rebuild itself from ground, and rushing to do that.
And is
will
it
be a
capable
mistake.
of doing that, or will there come a point, if it's really bad, that they won't be able to do that? And Reform will have, say, even if Reform only have somewhere between 7 and 10 MPs, I think that would be an incredible achievement if they do that. There'll be a massive thorn in the side, won't they?
They will be. And there has to be a reconciliation. This is sort of a controversial view, and I know not all other Conservatives share it, but I think there has to be a reconciliation between the Reform and the Conservative Party. I'm not against Nigel Farage joining the Conservative Party.
I think, we had Tobias Ellwood on earlier. I don't know if we can play a clip of it, but while you're here, no, he's shaking his head. But he was, one of these who was trying to make out that, Nigel Farage is an ally of Vladimir Putin. Absolute rubbish. I mean, it does them no good to keep attacking him like this. They tried it with David Cameron with his piece in the Sunday Times last weekend, saying, this is a dangerously divisive man. Completely backfired on him because there are traditional Tories who say, look, this is a man who's speaking about things the way you should be speaking about them.
I don't agree with Nigel Farage and even giving an inch of excuse to Vladimir Putin, but there's plenty of people on the Conservative benches. I got to start mentioning Caroline Noakes would be top of my list. Rory Stewart was there until recently on the Conservative benches. They're not Conservative at all.
No.
Nigel Farage is much more Conservative than most Conservative MPs. I disagree. I disagree with him.
Tobias Ellwood's probably one of those as well.
Yeah, I like Tobias, but
I like him as well.
I take your point. He's probably not going to be a Conservative peer after the next election. Anyway. Almost certainly he's in one of those categories we've just been talking about. Is about to lose.
Yes.
To the Liberal Democrats, probably, unfortunately. But no. What the Conservative Party has got to get used to is the fact that it really has let down its core voters, and Nigel Farage speaks to them in a way that few other Conservatives do. If Nigel Farage was here now, I'd have a very robust debate with him about his remarks on Ukraine. But is he a Conservative fundamentally?
Yes,
of
course he is. And also, let's not forget what the Conservative Party has sort of, squandered since they got in 2019. I mean, I know it was before COVID, but I remember thinking that night when there was a lot of conversations around how well Corbyn might do in certain places. In the end, they only won Putney, but there was thinking that there was a young vote coming out. Nobody really knew until the exit poll that it was an 80-seat majority. And what a ridiculous thing now to think of that being of no help, that you could have an 80-seat majority and do what? I mean, I'm not sure what we could say the Conservative Party's achieved in the last 5 years.
Well, I spoke to an Australian campaign consultant. He's run general elections all over the world, and he says he cannot think in all of his years, I think he's about 70, of a political party that has gone from such a level of support to descend so quickly, so comprehensively in such a short time. The Conservative Party's descent since 2019 has been a phenomenon on a scale.
It's been quite biblical, isn't it?
It is biblical. They've got all their policies wrong, delivery, the scandals involving individual MPs, the basic incompetence, like Rishi Sunak leaving D-Day early. Everything you could imagine that has gone wrong.
And now
this
betting scandal, which I'm told is going to be far more far-reaching than anybody knows, and may indeed go back to things that were betted on before the election. And it seems like the Conservative Party is riven. I mean, you say that CCHQ don't know what they're doing. It's almost as though none of the leadership knows what they're doing.
No. And look, the betting scandal is one thing, and I think it's unforgivable. But then there's the second thing: is when a crisis hits, how do you handle it? What do you do about it? You could argue that Rishi Sunak, Rishi Sunak, I don't think he's a bad man. I don't think he's an immoral man. I think he probably hates what a lot of these people. I hope he does. But he hasn't come forward and taken hold or gripped the thing. He hasn't said, no way, I'm going to suspend these candidates. This is what I said to Tobias Ellwood. This character Craig Williams, right, who's admitted to what he did. So it's something you can't hide behind, the Gambling Commission said we shouldn't talk about it, which is what James Cleverly did at the weekend, and we mustn't make any hasty manoeuvres. Well, hang on a minute. You've got a guy who's admitted doing it. Now, you can take a view on that as a leader and say, well, I don't think you should be representing the party. But he hasn't done that. No, he hasn't. And I don't know what you think. Well, you mentioned earlier he's got the event here in Times Towers, News UK Towers, with Harry
Never Mind
Cole.
the Balance with Harry Cole,
but the Prime, it looks like the fight has gone out of the Prime Minister. He sort of looks like
you could see it in Grimsby, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could.
He looked like a lost man. He didn't really want to be there.
It's almost as he's broken. Almost as he's broken. And it's sad to see.
I'm told, and you may know this better than anyone because you know these people, but I'm told that he's kind of quite confused about how unpopular he is. He can't believe how unpopular he actually is as an individual. And unfortunately, most of it is his fault.
And I think what because he lost to Liz Truss in that Conservative leadership election a couple of years ago.
Right.
And then, of course, he came back because Liz Truss messed up so much. I think that had quite an effect on him because he kind of thought, well, I was right.
Yeah.
The voters were wrong.
Right.
And I think that sort of philosophy has entered his head, and it sort of he became quite arrogant. Certainly the staff in Downing Street became very arrogant. They said, we were the adults. Remember that? The adults are back. And they stopped listening to other people.
Yes.
They became very arrogant, very insular, and well, we're seeing the consequences.
And it turns out the adults have got some children they're not looking after very well, and that's why it's all got horribly wrong. We did speak earlier in the show to former Labour Communications Director James Robinson, and let's have a look at what the Lib Dems are up to today. Ed Davies says there are now 10 days left to save the NHS. Not that old chestnut. This election is a chance to end the shocking scenes of people having to wait 12 hours or more in A&E, often in pain and in overcrowded waiting rooms. The Lib Dems are going to take, as you say, possibly some seats in the southwest from the Tories. They're sort of being attacked on all flanks, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that is fundamentally the Tory problem. Every time now they look to perhaps reassure people leading to reform. So the Prime Minister yesterday sent out a tweet saying, 8 years ago I voted for Brexit and I'm very proud. Now that is potentially the sort of thing that might attract a few reform voters back, reminding them that Rishi Sunak was a Brexit supporter all along. But that then annoys all the Liberal Democrats in the blue wall in the south.
Right.
And so there is no way out of this for the Tory party.
Right.
They have to rebuild in opposition, but there is still I still would encourage every listener, every viewer to your programme, Mike, to just think about that prospect of Labour having untrammelled power in Parliament for 5 years, and it shouldn't just be a tactical vote against the Conservatives. I think there should be people voting tactically to ensure that there are enough opposition members of Parliament in the next Parliament to ensure that in the select committees, in parliamentary questions, just in the general debate in the nation, there's enough people to give Keir Starmer pause for thought, because he could be an elected dictator if we're not careful.
Right, and who knows what he would do. Tim, thank you very much indeed. Tim Montgomerie there, the founder of Conservative Home. Let's have a voice note. Anna is in Surrey.
Morning, Mike. Anna, Surrey. Mike, I totally agree. The Tory party, alongside Labour, like to keep the public poor, uneducated and frightened because we're easier to manage like that. They resent and destroy anyone who has any hopes or aspirations. But, however, I don't agree with you on private schools. They should pay their way. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anna. Well, they do pay their way, actually, but we'll have another conversation about that.